The Canby Report was produced and recorded on the traditional territories of the Coquitlam, Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples.
It's July 17th, 2025, and there are 457 days until the Vancouver municipal elections. This is the Canby Report. I'm Matthew Naylor.
I'm Ian Bushfield.
Welcome back, everyone. Trying to find time to record has been challenging as visitors and visits to other places have taken precedence, but we are back with you now, and we thank you for sticking with us, especially to our Patreons on Patreon, which you can visit at patreon.com/CanbyReport.
Yes, this is our summer break edition. I'm going to be traveling a lot over the next month, so it may be a little while to our next episode. I will pause the Patreon charge for August out of guilt. You will still get access to the Slack channel if you sign up, but you'll get a free month.
What an incredible opportunity. Maybe I will even visit the Slack channel. So thank you for sticking with us. I hope you have a fantastic summer. For those of you suffering through the heat waves, stay cool. Meanwhile, Vancouver politics chugs along. This week, the big news is the by-election finance reports. Recently, there was a by-election that elected our two new city councilors, but it was more than just those two people running, and people spent money. What did they spend?
Yeah, this was the reports we were expecting, but they kind of got quietly released by elections. There was no headline pressing them out like I usually see. We found out that a lot of money got spent. 3 parties spent the max of what they could spend per candidate. Team spent half, which is still a pretty impressive amount. And the Greens did their forms wrong.
Oops.
Well, in terms of fundraising, we get basically 2 numbers, and you can dig really deep into it and get exactly how they raised money. But we get fundraising numbers for the campaign period, and I think we get expense numbers for the election period and campaign period, and I'll explain what the difference is in a bit to explain why the Greens possibly fucked it up.
So I'm going to rattle off some top-line numbers so you can have an idea as to what we're talking about here. The campaign period limit was $120,491.15, very important 15 cents, per candidate. I'm sure it's a formula. I'm sure it's like index-linked or whatever, yeah. But like, you know, it's like, this is how much democracy costs in Vancouver this year. But rather, ABC, $350,000, Cope, $122,000, Team, $120,000, One City, $115,000, and the Greens, tiny little $34,000.
That was the revenue. That's how much they raised. On the other side of the ledger, ABC spent $353,000 over the entire period. The election period starts the day people resign and ends a month before voting day. And then you're in the campaign period for the month before voting day for a by-election. And it's in that last month that you have a finance limit. So that's how ABC can spend above the limit. There's also some non-expense limit funds, but no one really claimed those. So ABC, $350,000 spent to lose badly. One City spent $151,000, Cope spent $118,000, Team $111,000, but they ran 2 candidates, and the Greens $68,000, which looked weird because when you look at the Greens form, they write the exact same amount spent for the election period and campaign period and added them up, which is also the same amount as they raised, roughly. So there's something in there. I kind of think the Greens spent $34,000 and just wrote the numbers down wrong. It wouldn't be the first mistake we've seen in a form. We'll get back to that in a second.
Honestly, sometimes these campaign finance forms are not super clear. I think it's important to have someone who knows what they're doing. I think they're doing their due diligence so far as they're able to. Scripts happen every once in a while.
If I had asked you, Matthew, what's the difference between an election period and a campaign period prior to recording, I don't know that you would have had a good answer without reading the act.
I think I probably would have felt it out. I did know from the Yes Vancouver pre-spending in the 2017 election that there is a distinction between the campaign period and the election period. So I think I probably would have managed to feel my way towards a correct-ish answer, but yeah, it's not super clear,
Well,
and also not everyone has a municipal politics podcast.
one of them should be called pre-election spending and one election spending, and we'd all be fine because that's what many provinces used. If you break down how many votes they got when you combine their candidates, ABC spent over $19 per vote, whereas the most efficient was Cope, who spent $3.40 per vote. Cope also came out with a surplus of $49,000 in campaign funds. Like, they fundraised gangbusters and ran a tight ship.
Well, that is impressive and bodes well for them as they go into negotiations with the other parties for a potential left-wing coalition. That is going to be a big thing they can hang their hat on in upcoming discussions. Other than Gene Swanson, they've struggled to remain relevant as a party in the last elections. This is a fantastic opportunity for them to come out swinging and like position themselves opposite One City as like an anchor point of this, potential alliance.
Yeah, and it's worth remembering Cope also got more votes than One City. It wasn't like they just blew them away, but they did get a little bit more if we're counting who won. Mm-hmm. If it was only one candidate was elected, Cope would have taken it, but people would have voted differently for so many reasons. Team raised an impressive amount still and spent a pretty good amount. Didn't do well for it.
No.
Thankfully.
Yeah, well, and like, I think ABC is venal and corrupt and silly, but I don't disagree with everything they're trying to do. With Team, I do, basically. I am against them. They are the enemy, I guess. Like, certainly something more than the standard respectful disagreements over policy. We just have completely different visions for what a city should be.
In here we see why the Green campaign never really landed. They just didn't have the money to get themselves out there, to get the attention. Politics isn't just about the money, as ABC demonstrates, but money clearly helps.
Money definitely helps. Money is important.
Money also follows attention. The Greens are in a very bad situation, which continues to be the story of every Green party in the country right now.
They're not in great shape, even like PEI, where theoretically they should be doing okay. I've spoken about this already, but unless there is another resignation, this is going to be the starting point for negotiations for Cope the Greens in One City. And this puts Cope and One City into a much stronger position than I think they would have been even a year ago, where the Greens had 2 councillors elected, and that was like the whole opposition, basically, except for Crispy Boyle. The winds are shifting.
I think the only thing that remains to be seen is who becomes the mayoral flag bearer for that side.
Does Andrea Reimer get forced into running?
Yeah. We'll talk flag bearers in a second for the mayor, but while we're talking about the complexities of filing financial reports, a bunch of people also got fined from Elections BC following absurdly lengthy investigations since the 2022 general elections. We've talked, I think, in the past about how ABC Vancouver was under investigation from Elections BC, and we now know that their financial agent, Corey Sue, has been hit with a $11,888 fine for accepting prohibited contributions and failing to return prohibited contributions on behalf of ABC Vancouver and Ken Sim. That's a pretty big hit relative to the others. Kind of small in the grand scheme of, like, punishments.
Yeah, they're all kind of toothless, these things. What is the point of any kind of campaign finance regulation? It is to make sure that money doesn't distort how a campaign is run and what people are able to access. The purpose of these penalties is to ensure that people don't violate them. Now, certainly $11,000 is, a fair chunk of change, but it's not astronomical, and it's certainly something that ABC has demonstrated the ability to raise. So I'm not sure that this is super meaningful in terms of what impact this is going to have on behavior in the future.
Yeah, and ABC wasn't the only one to get hit. Forward Together's financial agent faced a fine of over $7,000 for failing to repay campaign debts within 6 months of becoming due.
And there was a suite of 4 violations for Progress Vancouver, all of which totaled just over $15,000 for a variety of things like accepting prohibited contributions, prohibited loans, and failing to return prohibited contributions.
And my favorite here is Vision Vancouver's $750 fine for their financial agent for, again, prohibited contributions and failing to return them. Just kicking them when they're down and non-existent. To Progress, Forward Together, and Vision. I'm sure Elections BC will have a great time collecting that money, since Forward Together's debtors also can't get their money.
Oh, man. Oh, well. If only... No, there's no if only there. It's just Kennedy Stewart ran a truly awful campaign. It's so difficult to think of how it could have been worse, other than actively trying to sabotage it yourself. So, who knows?
Do you find it funny that Mario Canseco included Kennedy Stewart's name in a list of potential leaders of the federal NDP?
I think he's just fucking with people.
Yeah.
I did it once. What if I did it again?
Yeah. Maybe he'll take the bait again.
And as a federal liberal, I strongly encourage him to do so.
Someone else has an idea of grandeur, and that is Karima Lam, who wants to be the next mayor of Vancouver. This is Ken Sim's estranged chief of staff from the past campaign. They're not on good terms anymore, as Ken Sim is currently suing Alam for defamation, as we talked about on our last episode around the DUI allegations.
I made a joke about being a liberal in a federal context. This is a new idea. And, actually, no, I should clarify. There has always been vague discussions about having a Liberal Party of Vancouver, or Vancouver Liberal Party, whatever that looks like. I think the biggest reason they don't do that is because every party is a Liberal Party, with the exception of COPE, I think, which, or Vote Socialist. But, even one city has, very liberally vibes to it in terms of how they organize and conduct themselves. I don't think this is something people were clamoring for. Nevertheless, I do encourage him to run because it is very funny.
He told the Vancouver Sun he wants to build a coalition consisting of, quote, pure center, pure left, and even center-right figures.
Pure center, pure left.
It's purity politics, where he's allowing everyone in.
What does pure center mean? Purely...
The centrist purists.
It's like
how dare you split from my centrist party?
A mix of... how do you be... Well, I look forward to reading some of the communications from the Vancouver Liberals in future to see if they are as equally incoherent as they have launched to be.
I get the idea he has here that he did run a good campaign with Ken Sim, and because he won, right? Because they won.
Kind of an ex post facto, it was good, but was Kennedy Stewart monumentally terrible?
Yeah.
Who knows?
So he's got this idea that at least, Ken Sim is not popular, obviously. And can he bring something to the table that is different, that kind of, goes back to what was on promise without being so chaotic once you're in power? That probably has a, large constituency, a large amount of homeowners that would go for it. So I don't think the idea is inherently bad. But if you already know that one city COPE is probably going to pick their preferred mayoral candidate, and ABC is the incumbency, you're getting squished out in the plurality system we have. Shauna Sylvester faced that issue in 2018. It's hard for startup parties.
What's Rebecca Bly doing?
Yeah. If he can get ex-ABC members into the Vancouver Liberals,
then all bets are off and there's a real race. The success of Karima Lam's party is going to be determined by what Rebecca Bly decides. I don't know that everyone inside ABC is particularly happy. I don't think that, and having been on the short end of this stick in the past before, it doesn't feel great to be a member of a party under siege. It feels bad. There are people who would happily jump ship from those situations if they're not feeling particularly close to the leader. And it doesn't seem like Ken Sim has done a particularly good job of running a caucus.
Well, that's where ABC came from, right? Is the NPA fell apart ABC picked them all up and won a election out of it. So new parties can work, like, obviously, especially under our strict limit system. But yeah, you need to start picking up that momentum, and we'll see how it goes in the coming months.
As the Vancouver Liberals attempt to gather speed, Vancouver will be cutting back. A 30-kilometer speed limit is coming to local streets this month.
This is a motion through City Council and being implemented through staff. If your street does not have a center line on it, is a simple way to do it, the speed limit will be 30 kilometers an hour. This has been a big push from Vision Zero, the group that put fake bricks at the Granville Island crossing to help pedestrians threaten drivers to get across the street. A very effective protest tactic that made them look like they promoted vigilante violence against drivers, which legally we do not condone on this podcast, I believe.
That's correct.
Traffic death is a big issue, and getting people to drive slower is a very good thing. So slowing down speed limits, especially in residential areas. I live on a residential street now in Coquitlam. Usually it happens naturally, right? A smaller street with more parked cars, people will drive slower, but you can still get people ripping through. Especially some of these streets are labeled as bikeways, and getting cars to go slower helps the cyclists on it.
Both of us grew up in Greater Calgary.
Yeah.
Calgary is a place where residential streets are gigantic. They're so wide. And as such, they're very dangerous because people rip along them because they feel like they can, because they see all the way down the road. There is extensive research done on this. When streets are made to seem less safe for a driver, they become more safe for pedestrians, which is why things like weaves are built into the path of the road, or cars are allowed to park on alternate sides at different points so that cars have to drive and you don't have an uninterrupted sight line down the road. There are a lot of ways that a slower speed can be forced on a road that would otherwise not encourage people to drive at a safe speed. This is Fiat, though, which is different.
It's funny you mentioned rural or Greater Calgary. I went to school in Airdrie, and every residential street in Airdrie has a 30-kilometer-an-hour sign, because when the provincial mandate is residential streets are 50, you have to put up a sign at every block. Because in 1982, the city of Airdrie, Alberta, made all residential streets 30 kilometers an hour. And it's been that way since. They encourage other cities to do the same. One of the most conservative parts of Alberta, not the most, but not one of the most liberal.
It's not the most liberal.
And it definitely wasn't in the 80s.
I think
this change.
I think the liberal default position in the 80s was like open season, like hunting. This is a thing that Southern Alberta likes to do, which is just be very liberal at home and very conservative elsewhere.
So, yeah, it works. I'm positive to see it. I think it'll be nice to see this spread out to more communities as well. Good on Vancouver for this, in my opinion.
In ban news, garburators are being sent down the pipe, only to hit a giant fatberg that is clogging our sewers. Garburators are... I feel like it's a portmanteau. It's like garbage and then something.
Aerator? Syncerator? Aerator? I think.
Yeah.
The machines that chop up your food when you put it down the drain, but then people forget to put water down it, so it just makes your pipes dirty and it fills the sewage system with food waste, builds up into what are called fatbergs, a term I hadn't actually come across until watching an episode of the New Zealand-based show Wellington Paranormal, which is a combination of X-Files and The Office.
Sounds really good, actually.
I would recommend it. It's on CGEM. In one episode, a fatberg becomes sentient and attacks the city.
Amazing place.
We don't want sentient fatbergs in Vancouver, so let's get rid of the garburators.
It's true. As it turns out, garburator is a Canadian term, and it's derived from a portmanteau of the words garbage and incinerator, which is not what it does. It has a plate with hammers that pound the food into nothingness. The thing about those is that because people don't run a ton of water down after they garburate some food, that sludge can sit in a pipe and harden into an organic rock. And my parents had a garburator for like many, many years. And one day their sink started blocking up. And when they were snaking out this line, it was 15 meters of rancid, horrible, fermented sludge being pushed out of this thing. So the city of Vancouver banning garburators, not only is it good for the municipal pipes, the municipal sewer system, but also for your house. You shouldn't have a garburator, they're bad.
Yeah, this was a motion from Green Councillor Pete Fry, and it's going ahead, so good for him. Something that's not really going ahead very well is the ongoing messy lawsuit between Metro Vancouver and the contractor Acciona Wastewater Solutions over this North Shore wastewater treatment plant. The litigation we've covered a little bit because Metro Van is mad that this is way over budget and not actually being built. And Acciona is like, you're breaching the contract, you owe us a bunch of money.
Basically what has happened is Acciona dumped a huge amount of documents as part of the examination for discovery process on Metro Vancouver. This is a tactic that is tried and true in this kind of corporate litigation things, is to just bury people in documents. Metro Vancouver's lawyers asked for Acciona to remove any, quotes, irrelevant and duplicate documents and produce a declaration of the newly amended list, which you have to provide in advance of examination for discovery, which is basically it's a deposition where you ask questions to figure out stuff about the case. The examination for discovery and other proceedings in the trial are moving forward, and that is not something that Metro Vancouver was able to get the BC Supreme Court to stop. The shit is hitting the fan because there is nowhere else for it to go, as the sewage plant has not been completed yet.
What a fun, long-standing, and complicated litigation. I can't wait for Metro Van to get screwed by not getting it built and probably losing more and more money in this litigation. Maybe we'll come out on top.
I swear to God, if you're making me nostalgic for someone like SNC Lavalin, like, something's wrong here. This is bullshit.
Speaking of bullshit, Port Coquitlam.
And specifically things that are happening there.
Yes. From a story in the Tri-Cities Dispatch covering a recent council meeting, Port Coquitlam Council has pushed BC Housing to pause a proposed development for residents with disabilities, particularly those with mental illnesses, at guaranteed to income or shelter allowance rates, because there's not enough parking in the building.
Yes, so this is a proposed development that would be operated by New View Society, one of BC's constellation of housing providers, and would include 74 units and 18 parking spots. 6 of those parking spots would be for visitors, so there would only be 12 people who would be able to own a car in this space. That is actually something that is built in to the understanding of, like, the terms of reference for the community. They're like, only 12 people can own a car. That's the max. Everyone in city council seems to have lost their mind over this because they have, like, normally you would be required to put 74 parking spots for a development like this. A lot of the people who rely on organizations like New View Society for their housing, particularly those with mental illness or disabilities, don't own cars and don't drive.
Having just bought a car, they're very expensive. Even if you have an old car, maintaining it is very expensive.
Yes, which is not to say that a percentage of these people won't want to do that, and that is their right, so far as they are one of the first 12 who applies for one of the spots. But
it's worth noting, New View Society was planning to have a private shuttle service for residents as well. So it's not just, there would be ability for the other 62 units to access private transit plus public transit.
Plus, New View is not new to the town on this particular issue. They run other places, including a place called Maplewood Manor, which is a place with 6 spots and 20 units. Usually, of those 6 spots, only 2 or 3 of them are filled, which makes the 12-474 roughly right. If they're expecting the same type of people to be living in their building as at that other building, about 12 spots sounds right. It's a type of phenomenon called elite projection, where people who are affluent or are part of, elite strata of society will assume that their needs and concerns are shared by everyone. And that is simply not the case. Like, when you don't have to worry about where your food and your shelter and your meds are coming from on any given day, then you can start worrying about whether or not you have space to park your car. That's not a thing that many of the people with the challenges that this development is supposed to help have. I can guarantee you that every one of these people would prefer to be in a long-term permanent place that didn't have a parking spot than to be housing insecure. I guarantee it.
The argument on the mayor's side, Brad West, is that the city has this obligation on developers to provide parking. And so if they are forgiving that obligation for this, that costs the city $40,000 per stall, because they would then be parking non-existent cars on the street. And I don't think there's much of Port Coquitlam, if any, where you have pay parking, which is another way they could get their money back. But they would be basically giving $2.2 million in a variance. In many cases, they charge them. They just say, here, make an amenity contribution for $2.2 million, and we will forgive your parking stall requirement. But in Brad West's words, that's not an obligation that just disappears. It's an obligation that will have to be borne by the municipal taxpayers of Port Coquitlam. Guess what homelessness costs, Brad West?
Well, I can't imagine it costs Brad West himself very much, but otherwise he might be interested in doing something about it. However, try and have a little empathy, politicians, when you're making decisions for people who are not part of your exact social strata. Try and understand that there may be externalities. In this case, the low propensity of these individuals to own cars is actually of benefit to the city, and means that they won't have such high costs. Like, cities should be wanting people to take transit. Cities should, it costs every time a car rolls over a piece of pavement, that pavement degrades. The less people who are driving, the fewer people, the fewer times road is going to be damaged by drivers on it. It's so obvious to me, and I don't understand why they're like this.
The fewer cars you have on the road, the more parades you can have on the road, like the Vancouver Pride Parade that's coming up on the first weekend of August, as is tradition. A little bit more uncertain this year, as Pride was a little bit behind, it seemed, in announcing its plans. It seems like a big part of that is because of financial difficulties resulting from half of corporate sponsors saying, we're not interested in supporting one of Canada's largest LGBTQ celebrations anymore.
Yes, Pride has changed substantially since 1978, when a group of people put paper bags over their heads and walked down West End sidewalks as the first Pride Parade, which was in an atmosphere vastly different from where we are now. However, we are part of a global community. Sinister winds are blowing south of the border, and that is something that is going to impact us here. I think this is an example of it.
So I'm glad they got some news out. The parade is reversed from last year, which is a new route from the years before. It will start at Concord Pacific Plaza down in False Creek and head towards the West End along Pacific. The festival will be in the West End, which makes a lot of sense rather than having the festival down at False Creek. I was at that festival, and it was a really good spot with a lot of foot traffic. But it also makes sense to have the Pride Festival in the West End, where
Yes.
you're close to the parties. Mm-hmm. I hope it goes well. I'm going to be out of town, unfortunately.
The thing that I think this should remind my fellow LGBTQ friends out there is that the corporations will never love us and are only ever using us. I'm not saying that we should ban corporate pride entirely. I am all in favor of taking their money. Just know that they're not going to have our backs if the shit hits the fan, and we shouldn't pretend that they do.
Yeah, I think that's a good comment. I'm not part of the community, but I'm a strong ally as much as I can be. Things that aren't running this year: the Stanley Park Train, which Ken Sim had saved.
How many times have we covered this train? It's a train. It's like a little toy train, which apparently loses $3 million a year or over the last 5 years. How is this happening?
They're estimating it would lose $700,000 this year.
I want to stop talking about the train. Just fix it.
They sold 23,000 tickets within 90 minutes for Bright Nights in 2023, and they're still losing money.
How did you, poison one of your operators from exhaust fumes? This railway is fucked.
I just want Ken Sim to wear this because he was so proud to bring it back. That's
well,
all.
As he's wearing it, hopefully he's looking trim and buff because he no longer has a gym in his office.
Yeah, update from CBC that the infamous City Hall gym is no more, and they've reclaimed the office space, meeting space, that he had seized bizarrely. I think it was last year.
Yeah, last year or 2 years ago.
It all blurs together.
Time is a flat circle, and we've been doing this podcast for almost 8 years now. Thank you for sticking with us as we come to the end of this episode of the Cambie Report, which we always end with a little tidbit from Vancouver's history in a segment we call Vancouverata. This week's Vancouverata is
the Vancouver New Democrats. I wanted to talk about this because we talked about the Vancouver Liberals. Once upon a time, there was a Civic New Democrats, or the Civic NDP. I think it contested one election in the late 80s, mid 80s. One of the star candidates was David Levy, whose father was Norm Levy, and a prominent NDP MLA and cabinet minister under Dave Barrett, I believe. The Civic New Democrats were officially connected to the BC NDP in a way the Burnaby Citizens Association is as well. It was a way to say, COPE, which was then the Committee of Progressive Electors, isn't effective enough, so we need a Civic NDP. That was a bad idea. Didn't work very well. They never elected anyone. And by the 1988 election, they and COPE had basically just agreed to work together. Eventually, in 93, they merged to become COPE, the Coalition of Progressive Electors. And the Greens had been asked if they wanted to join too, and they went, nah. But they still kind of worked together on a alliance that also didn't work out well for them in the 93 election.
So I actually wonder if the left-wing parties should work together so that Vancouver can elect a government that is roughly aligned with what it wants. Not that ABC isn't very clearly what Vancouver wanted in the last election with roughly 50% of the vote. But, yeah, the Civic New Democrats, one roughly aligned with what it wants. Not that ABC isn't very clearly what Vancouver wanted in the last election with roughly 50% of the vote. The Civic New Democrats, one-term wonder, as it was described by the Vancouver Sun. I don't see them coming back, but it is nice to remember. Thank you for joining us. For Leg and Boot Media, I'm Matthew Naylor.
I'm Ian Bushfield.
Good night.